Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of About Abroad, where it's my job to introduce you to people who have built amazing lives for themselves in various foreign corners of the globe. We're talking with expats and thought leaders about moving abroad, remote work, visas, and all the fun and practical knowledge that you need to know to follow in their footsteps. If you've ever dreamed of making a life for yourself overseas, maybe working remotely or embracing long-term travel, retiring or studying abroad, or even just taking a peek inside life beyond your borders, you've landed in the right place. My guest today is one of the first people in the world to take advantage of the new digital nomad visas that are coming out. A lot of countries are starting to offer a digital nomad visa, which allows you to come work as a remote worker in their country and live there legally for a given period of time. Her name is Jess. She's an American currently living on the island of Hvar off the coast of Croatia. And she's built a pretty epic life for herself through this visa, but also just through some of the decisions that she made to get to this point in her life where she's working remotely, living on this beautiful island, and living as if she's on vacation every day, as she says. So had an absolute blast getting to know her story, all about the visa itself and how to go about getting one and what it's like once you're there, and just the island of Hvar and the beautiful landscapes of Croatia. It sounds like a great place. I haven't been there, so we had a great time just diving into all things Croatia in this episode. I hope you'll enjoy it. Please help me in welcoming Jess to About Abroad. Hey, Jess, welcome to About Abroad. How are you doing?
Hey, Chase. I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm doing really, really good. I'm very excited about this conversation because I have such a genuine interest in how you arrived to the number one country on my list that I've not made it to yet in Europe, which is Croatia.
Yeah, so excited to be here and share a bit about my crazy experience.
Well, let's just set the stage a little bit for everyone because I know a bit about you, and fortunately, I think for the audience, not a ton. This is the first time we're actually meeting, quote unquote, face to face. I know, that you're currently in Croatia and a little bit about how you got there, but why don't you just tell everybody a little bit really quick, like where you are and how long you've been there, and how it is that you're legally allowed to stay.
Absolutely. So I have been living in Croatia since late August of 2020. So decided to up and move during the pandemic, which we can talk about during this episode. I'm living in a town called Jelsa, spelled with a J, but pronounced with a Y, as in Croatian, on the island of Hvar. So I have been living this island life now, sort of unexpectedly, as long as I've been here. Was originally planning on staying 1 to 2 months, and then absolutely fell in love with the place and the people and the culture and just the lifestyle and everything. So decided to, over the next couple of months after arriving, figure out how to make that work legally, as you mentioned, and just socially and financially and everything. So yeah, my partner and I have been here, and I've been back to the States twice to take care of some family business and business, and then now I've been here since early June again. So love it, planning on staying. And people always ask, like, when are you leaving? Especially the people here, which is really funny because I get the sense that they don't want us to leave, which is so
Wow.
nice. And I just say indefinitely because I really don't know, and I don't really plan now more than 1 to 3 months in advance. So
Wow.
yeah.
You've built a pretty sweet life for yourself. Where's home back in the US?
So I'm originally from Long Island, New York, and I spent about 8 or 9 years in New York City and Brooklyn after university. And then I spent about 2 years in San Francisco prior to coming here. And I did about a 5 or 6 month stint in Southeast Asia and then again in North Asia with my partner in 2018.
Wow. Man, that's so you've been doing the kind of moving around bit for a few years now at least, and decided on Croatia. How did Croatia come on your radar? Was it somewhere that you had already been and wanted to go back to, or was it like a totally new thing? Or yeah, what was the genesis of that?
Yeah, so it was a combination of things and kind of timing that helped us end up here. So as I mentioned, it was during the pandemic that we sort of decided to up and move, and we basically packed up our San Francisco apartment. We had actually been living in the mountains near San Francisco with my partner's family for kind of the beginning part of COVID, which was really fortunate to be able to be,
Oh
kind
yeah.
of isolated that way, and to be able to be out in nature because you couldn't do anything else. We did that for a few months and then decided, like, we've always wanted to move to Europe. My partner's French American, and I've wanted to move back to Europe since I studied abroad in 2008 in Barcelona. So let's just do it. We're both, working remotely because we have to now. We both work in technology, so it's possible. So yeah, we did a road trip for about a month around the Western US after we packed up the San Francisco life. And then we just booked a one-way ticket to Croatia. And the reason why Croatia was a couple of things. So one, we basically knew Europe was our destination in terms of the continent. And then we had to narrow it down from there. So we looked at the entry requirements and regulations at that time, which was, July-ish timeframe in 2020, and they were always changing, right,
Right.
in terms of, what you could do then with what testing and whatnot. So we had a short list. I think it was about 5 or 6 countries. I had been to Croatia once before in 2016, just on holiday for a couple of days, and I had been to the island of Hvar for 2 of those days, and I was like, I think living on an island during the pandemic might be a good idea. Fewer people in and out. It's, beautiful nature. It's presumably quieter. I had a lot of assumptions. And then kind of the icing on the cake was I found an Airbnb, honestly, that just looked totally awesome and had this incredible terrace view. And I was like, I think I want to be there. I want to work from there. I want to do my exercise and stuff out on that terrace. And that's honestly how we ended up in this specific town, on the island, which I had never visited, and my partner has never been to Croatia before. So that is how we decided on this spot.
I absolutely love it. One big piece that we have to dive into, and I guess we'll go ahead and do it, is the legal aspect of being able to do that, because I really want to spend a lot of time on talking about Croatia and what life is like there and everything. But there's this fascinating bit is that all these countries are now coming out with these remote work visas or digital nomad visas. They have lots of different names, but essentially it's been very difficult, and Europe is notorious for this. It's very difficult for us as Americans to stay in Europe for beyond 90 days. Usually you have to get in and out of the Schengen, and it's a challenge. I've done the visa hopping thing. It's exhausting, actually. As much fun as it is, after a while it gets a little bit old. And so it's amazing that, as more people are getting access to remote work, these opportunities to live in these countries, truly live and, move there, settle down, and just work remotely are becoming more and more a thing. And Croatia is one of those countries, and you're one of those people that got on that train early. So tell us a little bit about this visa that you have and what it takes, just generally what you know about it and what the process is like. And we'll get into the details from there.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, I definitely was one of the early people to hop on that train with lots of help from people in the universe, I think, which we'll talk about. But I think I was the third person to obtain the new digital nomad visa, as it is called. So that was pretty cool. And it all sort of happened serendipitously at the end of 2020 when I sort of had to figure out, like, what is the next step? Because originally, when we came to Europe, our plan was, okay, spend 1 or 2 months in Croatia and then sort of use that as a jumping off point to maybe go to Italy and then France, Spain, and all over. But, obviously with the pandemic, it was just like not that easy to travel as it was before. And we also just fell in love with the place. So we're like, we don't want to move. So with all of that, I was basically here, on the tourist visa, which is actually, you don't need anything for it. You can come here as a visitor for up to 90 days. And then before that ended, I was like, okay, what's the next step that I need to legally stay here? And the option at that time, which was, I guess, in the fall, was basically to get a temporary residence permit. So in Croatia, you can get a temporary residence permit as long as you have a couple of different criteria checked. So you have, proof of income, proof of savings, I think a health insurance, proof of where you're staying, with some sort of contract to say you have a lease here for X amount of time. And there's a couple of other things, that you need. But it was fairly easy to obtain that one. And that I think I originally got for 6 months. And then I knew that I wanted to stay longer than that. So before that was up, this digital nomad visa just became available. And I had been in touch with a few folks that are, kind of closer to these types of affairs, like long-term expats here that were really helpful, people that are in touch with the ministry and like knew when this visa was becoming available. So I knew I had that option coming. I just didn't know exactly when towards the end of the year. So once it became available, sort of by word of mouth initially, and then it became all available online, I went to basically the police station here, which is how things are done. You go in person and you kind of figure it out with the people there that will help you with your documentation. And that's sort of how it all unfolded. I think you can continue to extend your temporary residence permit as an American. The only thing, and I'm by no means an expert, is that there are then tax implications, of course. So we did consult a tax expert here and in the States just to kind of understand like what are the implications, what are the rules. So that's one thing if you continue to stay on the temporary residence permit versus the digital nomad visa, which is good for 1 year from issuance. And then we will see about the renewal process. I don't think that's figured out yet because nobody has done it. It's literally year one for this visa. I know there's been a great deal of interest for the country. I think there's over 100 or 150 applicants from all different places. I think the US is in the lead for the number of applicants the last time I checked. But I think it's an incredible program, right? Because as you said, it is notoriously difficult for Americans and folks of other nationalities to stay in places that they wind up falling in love with and want to contribute to. And I think that was a big part of, again, like our desire to stay here. It was not only because we were having such an amazing experience, but we were like, we want to stay and give back and like contribute and spend money here and like meet people and be positive for this country as well. So it's been amazing to be able to obtain that visa. It's been a little bit different for my partner since he has a French passport as well. It was easier for him in a sense because EU citizens can stay here without a special visa, but he also can't obtain the special visa because he already has an EU passport and it's not available to those that already have that because they don't really need it. So that is the short of it, but we can go into detail about any of it.
Yeah, that's interesting that in some ways for a European it's like it was easier but also harder. Why would he want the digital nomad visa? Like what is there any necessity for him to kind of change his status in any way, or does it benefit him if
No, not from what we researched and understood, not really. Like there's no real need. It's honestly for me as an American just a great option to be able to get that because I don't have an EU passport. So I don't, those rules, those special rules don't apply to me to be here. But I really feel like Croatia at least, and I can't really speak for other countries in the EU because I've never tried to stay longer than, the visas I had. I feel like the country was really motivated to make this work. I know Portugal's another country that's been really supportive of this too, and letting people stay and stimulating the economy that way, and just diversifying the people here and the businesses here. So I think it's a super smart move for the country, and it's a huge opportunity for people that want to move.
Absolutely. I mean, it's you said it, like you want to be there to contribute to the society, and you're every day you're buying groceries or you're renting an apartment or you're investing cash into the economy, and also the cultural aspect that you mentioned, like bringing in people from around the world and people who already have jobs and aren't really you're not really taking anything from society. You're just there contributing in a lot of different ways. So this digital nomad visa thing makes sense for a lot of countries, and it's really cool to see it coming together. You mentioned something about going to the police station. You also do that here in Spain. Like when I have to do my visa renewals or update anything, you go to the police station to do that. One central police station here in particular. But to get the visa itself at the very beginning, did you have to go back to the US, or could you do it from your home country, or do you need to be there? Like, I guess the question is it more like arrive to Croatia on your tourist visa, then do the digital nomad visa, or could you get the digital nomad visa ahead of time? Because I imagine some people would be kind of scared to arrive. Like for instance, there's something we could have done perhaps in Germany instead of coming to Spain, but we had to go to Germany and be there and apply for this long-term visa when we got there. And that was really nerve-wracking because it was like, well, what if we don't get it? And now we've moved our lives here. So anyway, what's the process like for the Croatian visa?
Yeah, so many thoughts about all of what you just said there. So yeah, it definitely could be disconcerting, I think, if you're the type of person that like wants to plan ahead. And I feel like if you're choosing to move abroad, you can control certain things and other things you can't. With the visa, in my case, I didn't really have a choice because I had already made that decision. I was like, we're moving. And then just given the circumstances with COVID, we're like, okay, we're staying. And it was actually like more difficult to go anywhere. So we're like, all right, we're here now, and now we need to figure it out. And I kind of have the personal motto, if there's a will, there's a way, and anything can be figured out in one way or another in time. So it was really, again, just like really great timing that the digital nomad visa came about when it did, because it actually, I didn't really need to get it right away, because there's the tax implications, I think, happen kind of after a certain amount of time. And I hadn't come close to that amount of time yet. I just wanted the peace of mind to be like, I'm setting down some roots here. I have a year of runway. And then, as you said, it's just easier and better that way sometimes. So that was really, really good luck, that timing worked out, and that I was kind of building the plane as I was flying it, as was the Croatian government, I think, because it was, again, we were the first like cohort of people to even apply for this and get it. So with the temporary residence permit, I went to the police station with all of my documentation. I think I was missing some stuff. They told me and helped consult with that. And then I obtained that all on the internet. Like, I didn't need to go home for that. So I was able to do that here. And then it was the same thing actually with the digital nomad visa. It was like a separate application with a lot of the same information for the temporary permit, and then a couple of additional things that I needed. But I was able to get that all here, and I didn't have to go home to get any sort of additional things signed or information. So that worked out really
Oh,
well.
that's amazing. And if you do, you know, if you had been back in, if you had started the process back in the US, could you have gone to like, could you have done it all from there, or was it really imperative to be there in Croatia, you feel?
I think just for me, it was easier to be here because, again, it was like learning along with the people that were
Yeah.
issuing the visa. So that was actually a really cool experience, and a huge shout out to the all the people here that helped us get there. It takes a village, I think, when you're launching a program like that. But I think you can actually get it for like
Mhm.
remotely, so you can be in the States and apply for it and get it that way and have it ahead of time. I guess a word of advice to listeners, if it were me, if I were deciding on living in a place for, 1 year, up to 1 year, whatever it is, I'd want to go
Yeah.
visit and kind of spend a month, 2, 3 months, and like kind of exhaust that tourist visa and see how you feel before you're making that investment to, it's not really an investment, but taking the time to go through the visa process. If you can do that, that's a great option to do. And then get the long-term visa if you want to stay.
Totally. Totally. Yeah, I agree. Like you get a year and 3 months, or get that 90-day tourist visa, then get the extended one, and then and then go for the digital nomad. Get all the time you possibly can. And as far as renewal goes, what are they saying? I know they're building the plane as it's in the air, but like what's the general consensus? Is it renewable? Is it not? What do you think?
Yeah, I haven't read up on the updates since it was issued to me, which is I think in March. So things may have changed since then, but I think the sense was that you'd have to kind of leave the country maybe for 6 months. But then my understanding was that you could actually come back after three, because then you'd be back on the tourist visa after the 3 months, and then that would round out the 6 months. I don't
Who
know,
knows? Yeah.
really. I have to do some more research. I'm really hoping that the government decides that people can renew under specific circumstances that are also going to work for Croatia as well. So I don't know if that would mean sort of modified rules or regulations around it. But to me, I mean, like, I think our case is specific, but there are definitely other cases like this across Croatia where people are integrated into society. They want to stay. They're not here to like mooch off people, right? We have jobs, we're spending money, and we're just part of the community here. So I hope that people don't have to leave if they want to stay, but I know there's more to it than that, but I'm hoping that that's the outcome. So we will see. And if not, if we have to leave and then come back, I won't mind 3 months in France or Spain or somewhere
Yeah,
else.
it could be worse.
That's okay for me.
I gotta
Exactly.
go to Switzerland for 3 months. It's gonna be horrible. Um, and I'll take you off the pedestal here in terms of like having to be drilling you with questions. I'm sorry, I am, like I said, just super curious about these things. But
Yeah.
as far as some of the like main requirements to get the visa, obviously you need to have a job from elsewhere. They don't want you coming in and taking a Croatian job or a Europe. I don't know if it's limited to Croatia or Europe or what the zone is, but what are some of the kind of main bullet points that they're looking for?
Yeah. So it was very similar to the temporary residence permit. So Obviously, you need your passport. There's a fee to actually process the application. You have to have some sort of proof of health insurance, whether it's travel insurance or your local insurance, or you can get local insurance in Croatia as well. Local, I should have said, like your foreign health insurance from home. You needed proof of like savings and or income. I don't recall if it was both or one, and there's a certain threshold for that. And then you needed proof of your employment. So I have read cases here in Croatia where people have been self-employed, back in the US, and that works. For me, I was employed with a company, so that worked for me, as long as it was, like you said, outside of Croatia. I'm not sure if it had to be outside of Europe. I would imagine yes, because it's not a visa that can apply to EU citizens, so maybe, but I'd have to double check that. But otherwise, those were the pretty much the requirements. And then honestly, it was just like having some patience and following up with people, and then actually going to pick up the visa like a month later. You get basically like a temporary issuance, and then you get like the physical card, which was is one of my now most treasured possessions.
Yeah. You guard that thing with your life once you've gone through the visa process. It sounds like it's relatively smooth process. Like it sounds like, considering they just threw this thing together pretty quickly, it seems like they've got it together. It was relatively painless. Either that, or you're just a very positive person and you're like, yeah, it was pretty straightforward. But I can say here in Spain, it's not. It's notoriously like hilariously slow, bureaucratic, and like sometimes you just like toss your hands up like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? I'm going to move to Croatia.
Yeah, I think it was probably a little bit of both, right? Like I consider myself a pretty structured by the book person when it comes to certain things, but you have to just relinquish that when you move abroad or like try new things in
Yeah.
life. Otherwise, you'll just get frustrated. So I feel like it was like, just people coming together to try to help us, like even giving us rides to the police station, right? Like they were super awesome, our friends here, and they all helped us. And there were some other folks that really like trailblazed this. So I'll shout out to Yang de Jong. I hope I'm saying his name correctly. He's a Dutch guy who's been living in Croatia for a long time and has built businesses. And he really saw the value in bringing kind of this foreign investment in a way to Croatia and rallied with the ministry to get it done. And I think he like really spearheaded this with a group of folks, including a guy named Paul Bradbury, who's been an expat here as well. And they both really helped us kind of get this done, because it is a little bit confusing when you're in a place that, you don't necessarily speak the first language, even though most people here do speak English, which is really easy for us. But it's always like, you don't know the cultural norms exactly. There's nuances. Where do you stand in line at the police station? People are cutting you, but they're not really cutting you. All those sorts of things. It really helps to have friends on the ground helping. So yeah, I think it's a little bit of patience, but a little bit of persistence, and the process actually wasn't that bad.
That's great. That's really good to hear. And I 100% agree. Like I've come across some people who are going through these processes and they're kind of like, I don't know, swimming upstream a little bit, I guess I would say. Like they're beating their heads against the wall, trying to make it work exactly how they want it to work. And it's like, you have to just kind of go with the flow. You're in a foreign place, things are done differently. And don't frustrate yourself with trying to change the system. Work with the system, and you'll enjoy your time. Look at it all as like part of the cultural experience. It's like you're the third person to do the digital nomad visa. Like that's a really cool thing. And there's going to be some bumps in the road probably, but you just enjoy the ride.
Exactly. I totally agree.
We'll be right back to the show after a quick break for a note from our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by my friends over at Lexity. I've lived abroad in various countries, and one common denominator I've found is that dealing with foreign bureaucracy is a nightmare. Trying to navigate visa and immigration waters in another language is not something I'd recommend ever trying on your own, even for the most experienced of us. So when I recently had to renew my Spanish visa again, I turned it over to the pros at Lexity. They've already helped more than 5,000 expats and digital nomads find a home and thrive in countries like Portugal, or in my case, Spain, also Italy, France, and Greece. Some very desirable locations indeed. So whether you're trying to obtain your first visa abroad, purchase a property, or work through international tax issues, Lexity's team of friendly lawyers is here to simplify your journey. The team is super knowledgeable, bilingual, and thorough, and I seriously cannot recommend their services enough. My experience working with them has been incredible, and I can honestly say I don't know that I would have EU permanent residency if it wasn't for the help help of the team at Lexity. So if you're ready to make your move abroad, then Lexity is offering an exclusive discount to About Abroad listeners. Grab 10% off your first service with the code AboutAbroad2023 and learn more over at Lexity.com in the show notes and start your abroad journey today. If you've made it this far into the episode and you're still enjoying yourself, then I would love to ask a quick favor. Open up the app that you're using to listen to this podcast and leave a quick review. You can do this in Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and really just about any platform that allows podcast listening now. If you can't find that in the interface of the app, then scroll down in the show notes and find ratethispodcast.com/aboutabroad, and you should be able to leave it from there. Thanks so much, guys. We really appreciate it and hope you enjoy the rest of the show. Question I would love to get into a little bit about like what your work, because you're obviously able to do this because you work remotely, and I know you dabble in a few different things at a few different areas, which are all really interesting and pertinent to this podcast. But with the digital nomad visa in particular, are they looking for like a set amount? Do they have an income minimum? And as a second part to that, do they take anything like tax wise, or do they require that you pay some sort of monthly fee or anything to maintain it?
No, not as of right now. So there was a fee to obtain the visa and process it. I think that was less than $100, I want to say, maybe a little bit more at the end of the day. But no, I don't recall the exact minimum if there was one. I should have probably checked the most recent kind of things on the website of the ministry. But no, I think it was like proof, like official proof that you are employed, either self-employed or employed by another company, on official kind of letterhead and things like that, and a bunch of other kind of documentation that goes with it, like bank account statements. So really nothing too crazy. I mean, for me, I think they just want to make sure that people are not taking, right, they're net adding to the economy here, not taking away, which is totally fair and justified. So I think that's just kind of a formality that they have. So yeah.
We'll be right back to the show after a quick break for a note from our sponsor. This season is brought to you by my good friends over at Insured Nomads. They're the absolute best in the business when it comes to providing health, travel, and medical insurance for nomads, expats, and really just all forms of world travelers. I know insurance is often something that's overlooked when we're fantasizing about traveling the world, but it's absolutely necessity that we address this, because often the policy you have in your home country isn't going to cover you while you're abroad. And it's also a requirement, as a lot of people may not realize, to actually buy private travel or expat insurance, as it's called sometimes, to obtain a visa or even enter certain countries. So fortunately, there are companies like Insured Nomads to help us with this. Not only do they have excellent coverage and great prices, but they're also providing a first-class experience with additional perks and best-in-class technology via their app. It's an amazing experience. I can't recommend it enough. Now, this is a company that was built by world travelers for world travelers, so they know what it's like to find yourself in a difficult medical situation abroad, and they want to keep you from having that same bad experience. So the next time you're planning a trip abroad, whether it's for a week or a lifetime, check out Insured Nomads via the link in the show notes. Okay, now back to the episode. Let's circle back to your work, which allows you to do this. Yeah, I mean, I know I believe you've got a blog, you've got some consulting business, you've got a full-time gig. So tell us about the side hustles and the day-to-day.
Yeah, so was working at a technology company when COVID hit, and was doing business development and sort of partnerships work there, which is work that I've done for the past decade across the finance and tech industries, which I think is actually totally different than a lot of digital nomad stories. And the term digital nomad has like a lot of different meanings. I think in one of your earlier podcasts, you were talking about this as one of your guests, where I think he was saying he was a slow mad potentially, or maybe you were saying that. But yeah, so I think, I was working in like a very traditional industry initially in my career in finance. And I'll just give you kind of the backstory here, because I think it's a little bit interesting and maybe some people can relate out there. That was like a desk job where you were chained to your desk, and like I was trading stocks. So I had to like be at my terminal, as they call it. So I did that for the first part of my career, and that was great for its own reasons. But at the end of the day, at the end of that part of my career, I was craving flexibility. I was like, not only for like the creative and like kind of growth part of it, but also just like logistically, I wanted to be able to have more flexibility, work from other places. And that was really one of the motivations to move into the technology space. So I moved out of finance into a technology startup at the time, which had a lot of kind of crossover with finance, which worked really well for me career wise. But that was a pivot that I made that I am so happy that I did. Like, never looked back after that, because it's kind of put me on a trajectory that has led me to this point, and now I live in Croatia. So anyway, it's a long journey. There's a lot of steps in that process, but basically, I moved into technology doing kind of different go-to-market or business development roles across sales, account management, strategy, partnerships, and all those sorts of things. And have done that at a couple of different companies, both large and small. Really enjoyed it. And then when COVID hit, I was able to actually do that remotely, because most companies in the tech space decided our employees are going to work from home, and many companies enabled their people to work from anywhere, at least temporarily. So that is what helped me move here in the short term. So that's one thing. And I think I've met a bunch of people here that are doing similar type jobs, which again are not like the traditional, like, you're a writer or you're like a full-time blogger, the things that people traditionally think about as like a digital nomad or people that are living as expats. But yeah, so it's a little bit different, but it's been working really well for us. And my partner does something similar in the product management space. And then in terms of side hustles, yeah, so I've started doing some consulting for that work as well on the side. And that sort of happened accidentally slash organically. I was just talking to lots of folks in the industry. I have a really great network of people that are interested in similar things in terms of the professional areas that I have experience in. And also this, people are genuinely interested, like you, right? In like, how do I live here? What's my thought on remote or hybrid work? And it all kind of just came together in sort of these consulting gigs that now I am doing. So trying to work less here, but also working a lot, which is good. But yeah, that's something that I'm leaning into, because it's, again, something that affords flexibility, and that's something that at this point in my life I really, really value. So doing that with basically pre-seed to kind of Series B or C companies, helping them out with their partnerships and sales strategy and go-to-market stuff, which I love to do and have a lot of experience doing, working with lots of very cool people. And then on the side, I have a travel blog with my partner. It's called Tales Traversed. It needs to be updated, as I mentioned before this call. So I will be doing that hopefully before this airs. But that's just a collection of really photography and some writing and just sharing our experiences. And the purpose really is to help inspire people, to show that you can travel and have a full-time job, and really cultivate and kind of build the life that you want. It's hard. Like, sometimes maybe you get this too, having been an expat now. You're posting pictures on Instagram or telling people about, that you're on the beach or like traveling to all these places, and they're like, "Do you even work?" Blah blah blah. And it's like, yes, I actually hold down a full-time job and I have security, and I really, I have my stuff together, so to speak, in whatever sense you think about that as. But I also really value my
Yeah.
lifestyle and these experiences. So you can do that. And yeah, hopefully, like, this story and then my blog can help show people that.
Yeah, I believe it is. I mean, already, like, just from the little bit of interaction we've had before this and following some of the things you're doing, I definitely find it inspiring, and I can totally relate actually to a million things you just talked about. Our path is very similar. The path we took. I also worked in finance and insurance for the first chapter of my career, and was
Yeah.
and left otherwise awesome role and career path and income and people. I actually really loved like almost everything about that, except for the fact that I just wanted to, and I actually worked remotely, wasn't chained to a desk. I traveled a lot, but it was all domestic, and I really craved international experience and just wanted to live abroad. Like, really just felt like I needed to be immersed in other cultures to live a full life, and I couldn't have both.
Yep.
We tried to make it work, actually, to the credit of the company. Like, we tried to figure out some way to make it work, but it was too early, I think, in the location independent ways of the world, that to make it happen. So anyway, I can relate on a lot of levels. Like, it was, it takes big sacrifice, I think, which is something I love to touch on in this show, because I probably get, there's probably like two or three subjects that I get a lot of emails about or comments about, like, and that making that big lifestyle shift to obtain location independence, to move abroad, to make sacrifice. People are strapped down by mortgages, kids in school, debt, their job. They just feel like they can't, their career. I can't change that. I'm going to be vice president at the end of next year. I can't leave that now. I've worked so hard for this. But there will always be that next rung on the ladder that you're trying to get to, no matter what. And if you don't
Hmm.
cut the tie and just make the change now, you'll never do it. You'll always have a reason to stick around. So I think, it sounds like it is definitely coming from a place of privilege to say, well, I'm just gonna leave it all behind and just go jump and make the leap and do it. But like most people actually can if they're willing to make some sacrifice. And then everybody I've had on this podcast that's done that, like yourself, nobody's come back and said like, yeah, I kind of wish I hadn't. Like everybody's like, I wouldn't trade this for the world. Like this has been the best decision I ever made.
Yeah, I mean, that really resonates. I agree. I mean, there's like these environmental factors of like your life, like where were you born? What is your situation? How did you grow up? Like all those sorts of things that some people don't have control over that, right? And I feel very fortunate to have had a life that set me up to be able to have these choices. Not everyone does. But then I do think it takes guts, right? It takes courage. And one of my favorite quotes, not to be cheesy, but is by Anais Nin, and it's life shrinks or expands in proportion to one's
Mm.
courage. I really believe that. And I found I've done a lot of self reflection. I think a lot of people did during COVID, especially because we spent a lot of time, sitting
Yeah.
still. And some of that reflection for me was it was just fear. Like, I wasn't doing anything because I was scared. And I was like, that's not who I want to be. That's really not how I want to operate, and not where I want to drive my life from. That point of fear. I want to drive it because I'm hungry for things and experience, and I'm not scared, and I have courage. So my personal philosophy, part of it is you can always kind of go back to things. And I do know there are complicating factors, like you said. Like I personally, I don't have kids, I don't have a mortgage, and that those are choices I made because I've never wanted that kind of restriction on my life. And those are beautiful, amazing things to have. But for me, it's not choices I've made, and that's also again set me up to be able to pursue this lifestyle right now. And who knows, maybe it won't always be the lifestyle that I want to lead. I'm a huge, huge fan of kind of editing your life as you go. And for me, it's funny, I have to like balance being content and being present and kind of being like, okay, I'm just going to sit with my life right now and really enjoy this moment versus thinking about the next thing. It's something that I've always kind of, it's been an internal struggle, I would say, over time. But editing your life as you go is good, right? Like things are going to change, people come in and out of your life, like the world changes. Obviously, we've learned that recently. And you just kind of got to go with the flow and kind of see what works for you. There's actually a concept, or I guess it's a word, that I learned recently after listening to Jeff Warren's podcast on the Calm app.
Mhm.
So I try to meditate. I wouldn't say I'm a full-time meditator or really into it yet, but I'm trying to get into it, and I find it really helpful. But basically, this concept of equanimity. Have you ever heard of that word
No,
before?
no, I love this word already. I'm eager to hear more.
Wait, so I'm actually going to Google it, the official definition, so I don't mess that up. But basically, he was saying that this concept is like you let things kind of come in and out of your life without holding on too tight, and like letting them kind of bounce off. Actually, I'm going to read this right verbatim off of Google, because Google knows everything. So, equanimity is calmness and composure, especially in a difficult situation.
Oh, I love this.
So, I love that word or that concept, and I've honestly been applying that to my life since I learned it a couple months ago, and it has helped me deal with things. Like you said earlier, like things happen when you're traveling, you're abroad, or like just in everyday life. And taking this concept of equanimity and just saying like, breathe, things come and go, don't hold on too tight, and it just makes life easier.
Yeah.
Like just not worrying a lot. I happen to be a pretty, or was, I'm an evolving anxious person. Hopefully, I'm becoming less anxious over time. But that concept really helped me. So anyway, I went on a little bit of a tangent there,
No,
but
it's
I think it all ties
it's a
together.
beautiful tangent. My favorite word in Spanish, I think I've mentioned this on the show before, is tranquilo. I learned this word early
Hmm.
on when I first started studying Spanish, but it like resonated with me. I actually said one year, I was like, I'm going to focus on this word every day. Like I'm going to, and because they use it a lot in Spanish in the way we might say like no worries or chill or it's all good, it's always tranquilo. And like it and everything here in Spain, and I get a sense in Croatia too, like in southern Europe in general, I feel like there's a very tranquilo vibe where it's just like, it'll get done, life will move on, it's fine. Like I had a really funny thing happen actually, like yesterday. I was at a like out watching a soccer match with friends, and we were trying to get just a drink or something, and the waitress just like kept walking right past us, and there was a mix of expats and Spaniards, and those of us like not from Spain were like getting visibly angry, like just like she's walked past us like 20 times, we can't get a drink, it's been like an hour, whatever. And everybody like the others were just like their heart rate wasn't racing, they were chill about it. And anyway, it just made me
Yeah.
think like, like it, Spain and living abroad, living in different countries, learning how people deal with things. Like for me, it's slowed me down a good bit. And we come from a society that's like, I mean, you lived in New York, you lived in San Francisco, we've worked in finance, you sat at the terminal, like these things get your heart rate up. And when you get into some of these other societies, you're now living on an island in a beautiful place in Croatia where like things move a little slower, and that really slows you down and gives you perspective and gives you, what's the word again?
Equanimity.
Equanimity. Yes, I'm gonna write this one down. So
Yeah.
anyway, it's all part of like these are the things that like aren't on the aren't online that you see like when you look at pictures of moving to a place, but like these are the things you learn sort of through osmosis when you're living in a new place, I think.
Totally agree. And actually, there's a very similar phrase here in Croatia. It's pomalo. And that's like, take it easy, like, don't worry about it type of thing. And yeah, there's just like no sense, right? So it's so funny. You mentioned like living in New York and San Francisco. I feel like I was much more tightly wound, for lack of a better term, and very type A, like frenetic, right? Because you're just running around all the time, getting things done, and like I don't know. You get the vibe. Here, it's very, very different. And I see people here sometimes, like expats, who get really wound up. I think a little less so in Croatia because I feel like more chill people come here. But in other places where they get so wound up about stuff, and you're looking on the outside when you're a little bit calmer yourself, right? And you're like, have some inner peace. You're like, why? What is? I mean, maybe that person has stuff going on, right? That's fine. But like, what's the point of getting wound up and getting so upset and angry? Like, it's just detrimental to that person's well-being and also to all the people around them. Like there are of course times to get upset and to fight for what you're trying to fight for, but most of the time it's not. And this is not me trying to be preachy, because this is something again that I'm learning myself every single day and I work at it, but it's something my partner has really taught me too. We are very opposite in a lot of ways, and one of the things, he just doesn't let things bother him, and it's always something I've admired about him, and I've tried to like really adopt into my personality as well. But yeah, you just need to adopt that personality, especially when you're living abroad, because it'll just save you a lot of heartbreak.
It will. It'll let you enjoy the ride a lot more. And that's funny that he's helped teach you that. Do you think you said he's French, right? So like, is that partly because of his culture related to France, you think, or is it just kind of how he is?
That's an interesting question. I think it's actually more having to do with the fact that he's one of
Yeah.
five
Okay.
siblings, and he grew up in a big family, and like he just had to go with the
Yeah.
flow, and I think it's just his personality that he just doesn't let things rattle him, and he's super calm about it. So yeah, I think that's just him.
Gotcha.
So I was going to ask you, Chase, like you've had a similar path in a lot of different ways. What was like the turning point for you, right? Because it sounds like similar to me, you got a taste of like this life that you kept building for yourself, and you're like, "Ooh, I like that. Next step, level up, like that. I like that. I like that." And then you're like, your life was probably really good in the States and like having that job that you mentioned. But then you're like, I want to do the next thing. Like what was the next step for you? Like was there a day or a moment or a situation that made you take that leap to the next step?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And there are two answers because there were sort of two big steps that were taken. So the first one was leaving the stability of the job, selling the home, giving up the company cars and the stock options and the retirement funds and like all the things. You said something earlier like I've got my stuff together, like giving up all the stuff that society says is should be together, and going to more of like a digital nomad lifestyle and working on an e-commerce shop on the road and traveling all the time. So that big step came, I have to say, like completely because my wife really pushed for it and she really wanted it, and I was tempted to stay the course, but we both just had this like overwhelming desire to travel a lot, and I thought I can make it work to work remotely from other places. But like I said, in the end we couldn't do that. It was just like I think a fear of the mundane was sort of like what was creeping into us. We were going on these, we had our couple weeks of vacation a year, and we'd fly to, I remember one year we flew to Italy for like 6 days, like left on Friday after work, came back on Sunday, and like the next week, and like saw like 4 cities and just had this like hectic trip. And we were like, we love that way too much for that to just be like 6 days out of our year. So we have to figure out how to do this
Hmm.
more. So it was this kind of combination of the fear of the mundane and just a need for adventure. And then the second piece is when we decided to move to Spain, and that was more like, okay, we could keep traveling a lot, kind of bouncing back and forth on these 3-month trips, and which was just awesome at the time. Like we were content with that. But when we found out about this visa for Spain, which is sort of like a digital nomad visa, it's actually set up for pensioners, like retirees. But when we found this out, we were like, huh, we could actually stay in Europe for a whole year at a time and keep renewing it. What if we tried actually like living in a place and like going through that whole process? And
Yeah.
just like once we started looking into it and we realized it was possible, it was like realizing that it was possible just ignited that fire and totally forced us into being like, we can't say no to this now. And I have to say that's a big reason why I wanted to start this podcast, is because just to let people know that it's possible. Like that's
Yeah.
that lack of inspiration was certainly my case. Like I was like, oh, this just isn't possible. You'd Google how do I stay in Europe for more than 90 days and everything would say you can't. And so there's more content out there now. There's more information flows quicker. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if that answers the question directly, but those were sort of the two different chapters where I made like big steps.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense, and I'm sure that a lot of your listeners will that will resonate with them, right? It resonates with me, and it's those are similar things that I've experienced and have led me to kind of lead the lifestyle or build a life, like you said, that you've built for yourself as well. So I think it's
Yeah.
awesome.
Well, thanks. I think it's really cool to get to meet people now, especially, living here in Europe. I meet a lot of expats or people that are traveling through. Just yesterday here at my co-working, I met two new people who are coming through and spending 3 months here, and then they're moving on. One guy's going to Turkey, one guy's going to I don't know, France, I think. And like I'm getting to meet people that way from all these different nationalities and backgrounds. I get to meet people like you who have followed their dreams through this podcast. It's sort of like a dream come true, because I really crave that like these little pings from people from different corners of the world to share their stories and how they got here. And I'm just like kind of genuinely fascinated by it.
Yeah, I totally get that. And listening to your podcast, I felt that, and like reading about folks and just meeting people all around through traveling and through living here as well. It's been very inspirational. And I feel like, at least for me, I need to go where I feel the energy, right? Like where feel my energy rising from. Like what are those situations, and really kind of lean into them. And I think also it's a function of like as you get older and every year you kind of like you're learning things, right? You're learning things about the world and yourself, and then you can kind of keep going in the direction that deep down you should be going, but you might have not have had like the sense or the wit or the courage to do before. And I think that's a really beautiful, cool thing. And that means something different to everybody, right? For you and me, it's like we love adventure, we love the unknown, we like different things, right? That's like satisfying for us, and it sounds like for your partner and mine as well. And for other people, they crave stability and they don't like that, and that's totally cool and fine too. But I agree, like just letting people out there listening to this know that impossible is nothing, right? You can make things happen, you can figure out a way, and you can't plan too far in advance. Like if one thing doesn't work, something else to work out, and things work out as they are supposed to anyway. So
Totally. As
no
you
sense in
said it
worrying.
earlier, like editing as you go is it's an awesome concept. I love that. Like our plan when we came to Spain was to be in Valencia for 3 months and stay for 1 year and then go back to the US. And so we were, and actually I left this out of the story earlier. We were actually back in the US. We were trying to buy a house again and like have like a home base. And then we were just going to travel
Hmm.
for a few months out of the year from there. But all these doors kept shutting in our face. Like we actually, funny story, we actually quote unquote bought a property that actually wasn't for sale. So we like our realtor accidentally showed us the wrong property, and we thought it was great. We were planning on having a home here, and then it turned out it was the wrong place. And so anyway, we just had all these doors kind of shutting in our face, like things falling through with all kinds of like bureaucracy and stuff. And we were like, huh, well, we know about this visa now in Spain. Let's just go there. And so all these things that seemed like negatives at the time turned into us deciding to go to Spain for 1 year, Valencia for 3 months, and now we've been in Valencia for 3 years. So totally editing as we go. And I crave this type of life, and it's not, like you said, it's not for everybody, but it is for those of us that crave it and want that change and the flexibility. It works really well. I'm going to hold on to that edit as you go thing. I like that. You talked about the energy of a place, and I would love to learn a little bit more about Hvar and where you're living, like Croatia in general, and then specifically the island that you're on. What's the life like there? How do you describe it when you talk to friends and family back home?
Wow, I love it so much. I'll just start with that. It's funny. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful place, like the people and the surroundings. And it's a much, much slower lifestyle, as you can imagine, than New York or San Francisco. And that was something that my partner and I like kind of knew we wanted, but didn't really know to the extent until we really started living it. And we're like, wow, we don't miss big cities at all. And it's funny because, like, 5 years ago, I could never have imagined leaving New York. I was like, this is my place. But no, the lifestyle here is very different than in the States in that, it's the typical like people work to live, they don't live to work.
Hmm.
That's like one thing. It's very family oriented, very community oriented, and because the towns and the villages are smaller than the larger cities in other places, more people, and naturally there's a bigger sense of community. And that was something that my partner and I really never felt we had, living in San Francisco and New York. It's like the first place where we really feel like we have like a huge net of people around us that like genuinely care, are genuinely good people, and have values that align with ours, like prioritizing health and happiness and lifestyle, right? Really, and making everything else work with those things first. And that's a very different vibe, I think, to the than the States, at least through my experiences. So, the lifestyle here, there's like a little town square we go to every day. We have our coffee. We see tons of people we know. Um, we work out, either whether it's outside. It's a little hot now for that, but there's a gym here that we go to, and then we're working during the day. We work actually from home because we have some space to do that. There actually is no co-working space here yet in this town. There may be in Hvar town, but in our town of Yelsa there isn't yet. And then yeah, we go to the beach in the afternoons for a couple of hours, and we cook a lot at home. And yeah, there's just like an endless amount of things to do. I actually have a friend from the States visiting right now for the week, and she's like, "Oh, I see why you
Yeah.
moved here." Like instantly. She was like, "I get it," because it is just a slower, more relaxed kind of pomalo, as I mentioned, lifestyle. And that is something that I think after, especially after COVID, and like just again, like that caused some reassessment, I think, in our lives. We were like, this is something that we want to do, and we just feel very calm and happy here. And it doesn't mean that everything is easy, right? Like figuring out work, for my partner has been a little bit of a challenge, and you just need to like figure things out and take your time. And sometimes things don't work out like instantaneously, but they do in the long term. You just got to take those little steps every day, and then you look back and you're like, wow, I made a huge leap, right? So anyway, again, a tangent, but the island of Hvar is absolutely stunning. There is a really cool mix of like kind of deserty feel in some areas of the island, and then it's really lush and green. And then I think Croatia has the most beautiful swimming locations in the world, and I've traveled all over. Just crystal blue waters, amazing rocky shores, and you can explore like endless amounts of trails and things to do here. So I've lived here for almost a year, and I feel like I've explored like 10% of the
Wow.
island, and we're out and about like doing things all the time. So yeah, it's not a huge island, but there is a ton, and there are like hundreds of islands you can visit in Croatia. We've only actually visited the mainland twice since we've been here, again because of the pandemic. Like travel just wasn't really in the cards, but that's something we can't wait to do as well, to go to some of the cities and the countryside on the mainland too. It's a little bit of a different lifestyle here because you need to take a ferry to get anywhere, and the ferry takes a couple of hours, but well worth it. Part of the whole package of a slower lifestyle. We wound up buying a car here actually after a few months, which was a game changer because you can pretty much walk everywhere in our town, but having the car, like we really felt the freedom to go anywhere we needed, whenever we wanted. And we had amazing friends that were driving us around if we needed. But now we have the car. We both learned to drive manual, which is I think is pretty hilarious. Because as an American, we were used to driving automatic, but now we have our little Suzuki and we drive all over the island. And yeah, it's just a really cool life. I honestly feel like I'm on vacation every day, but I'm not. And that I have to actually pinch myself when I wake up. I'm like, wow, I don't need a vacation from this. And I've always traveled a ton, like throughout my career, throughout my life. Like I always maxed out those vacation days. I think everybody should, especially in America where you don't have a ton of
Yeah,
them.
you've got six,
But
you
now
better use them all.
make them make them work. But now I actually don't have that innate desire to travel right now. I'm sure that will come back because this is still like new to me. I've only been here a year, and the summertime's amazing and blah blah blah. But I don't have that desire to like go and get out because I love where I live so much. And that was a huge driver of wanting to stay.
That it can't be any more beautiful than that, right? Like if you don't need a vacation from your day to day, like if you feel like you're living a vacation, then that's sort of a dream come true. You've come a long way from the terminal.
A very long way. I mean, like I said, little steps, right? It's kind of insane to look back and think like that was my life, even 2, 5, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It's just you just got to keep pushing for your kind of live your truth. I know that's a cheesy saying, but that's really resonated with me more and more as I get older. You have to just like not care what people think and just do you
Yeah.
and make it work. It's your life. You only have one. It's short. Health is not guaranteed. That's something that's driven me
Mhm.
personally to make decisions I've made. And yeah, you just never look back.
That exactly what you just said. When you asked me earlier, I could have put it more eloquently, like you just did, about like what was the catalyst for making the big leap from leaving like a more stable career, and that sticking to your truth kind of concept. I don't know that we used those words exactly, but something along those lines. It was like this desire to be immersed in other cultures and to travel and to live like you're on vacation more is just too much a part of us, me individually and my wife and I as a couple, to deny. And like you can't keep
Yeah.
denying that just because society kind of says like, well, that's not really the way. Like, you just don't do that. It's like, well, some people do. Why can't I do that? So I think it's
Yeah.
really important to reflect on that. Like the lifestyle that you and I are living is definitely not for everybody. But I get a lot of people who write in from the show and say like, you're right. That lifestyle is not for me. I like my house in suburbia and the plan that I have and everything. But I like listening to people like Jess who are living on an island in Croatia and living kind of vicariously through them. So that's a really fun aspect of the show and of the people I get to talk to doing this. I want one more question on the island of Hvar itself. What's the what's the community like for you? You've mentioned several times you have friends, you see people in the square. You're in a small village, which in some countries I will say like can be a good or a bad thing. Sometimes the small villages are like, whoa, expats, foreigners, like you're invading our space. Other times it's very welcoming. Sometimes there's no expat or no foreign involved. You're like the one and only foreigner there, and that can be a good or a bad thing. So I
Hmm.
would love your perspective on the community in the village, and then also Hvar in general.
Yeah. So we have had a 100% positive experience here, which, as someone who's traveled all over the world, that's not always the case, even when you're traveling, or especially if you're living in a place as an expat. Here, people have been extremely welcoming. And I think people were really curious. because they were like, okay, people come here on vacation, people stay like 1, 2 weeks, maybe a month. And then they saw us here like in the winter and they're like, why are you still here? We don't understand. And I was like, look around, it's amazing here. And you always obviously like, it's the same thing wherever you grow up or live, right? You don't have that same like maybe nostalgic kind of feeling, or that's not the right word, but it's not new, it's not exciting. And for us to come with like this different perspective, I think has made, I think people realize that like this place is insanely beautiful and amazing. And it's like it's just a different perspective, right? But people here have been so welcoming. Like I mentioned that Airbnb that was just like the reason we came here ultimately. That was like the period at the end of the sentence. We came here and the granddaughters of the owner of that building were so kind, basically our age, and they were like, "Oh, we'll take you out to meet our friends." And we met all these people over time, and then from there we met more people. And there's this feeling of like that I didn't have in the States as much. Of course, with my good friends and family, I did, but like even people you're not super close with here will go out of their way for you. And it's just like they don't give it a second thought. And that to me is so special. And it's something that is like just hugely important to me now and will be forever going forward. But it wasn't before because I hadn't known that that was like a thing before. So here in Yelsa, there's I think 1 or 2 thousand people, and it fluctuates kind of year round. Some people leave in the winters and come back. There's other kind of villages and towns on the island that are comparable size, and then there are much smaller, but they have like 100 people, which is a little too tiny for us personally. We'd love to visit, but we like to be somewhere where there's a little bit more going on. So, yeah, people have been super great. Again, I think very curious about our situation. It was also really unique during COVID too, because there was like not much going on, and people we just kind of like met people outside for coffees and like went on walks and like it just like made it work, but everybody was really in one place and not moving. And that was like the perfect environment for making new
Yeah.
friends in a way, because no one was doing anything and like people were just kind of focused on like what was right in front of them. So that's been really great. There's a bunch of expats here, but we actually are probably even more friendly with the locals actually, which is really special and cool. The young people here have been like super welcoming, and everybody else as well. So just yesterday, I had some figs that were given to me by a woman who I'm very close with, who runs a charity called Hvar. She grows figs. She gave me these amazing fresh figs. They were as big as my head. And then I was like, I have too many figs. I'm going to get sick of eating these figs. So I brought them to my neighbors downstairs, and then they immediately insist on giving me something in return. So I got a whole bowl of sour cherries back and some fresh bread. And I was like, this is
Wow.
amazing, right? Like I didn't even know who my neighbors were in San Francisco and New York. So that is something that I think is kind of a European thing, especially you get it more in the smaller towns and villages. So it's just it's pretty magical.
Oh, that's an amazing story. You woke up, didn't have figs or cherries, and you ended up with both, and made somebody else's day by sharing with them. Pay it forward. Oh,
Exactly.
it sounds like a
Yeah.
really great community. I mentioned this earlier. I haven't been to Croatia yet, and it's literally been like at the top of my list for a couple years now. And it's odd coming from Spain. It's one of the most expensive places to get to in Europe. Like I could fly to
Mm,
all over Europe directly from Valencia for like certainly less than 100, often less than 50 euros.
yeah.
But to get to anywhere in Croatia, it's well over 500 usually. So I just keep not
Interesting.
prioritizing it. Like, oh, I'll get there eventually. But my wife actually did her yoga teacher training on the island of Vis, which I believe is pretty
Yeah.
close.
Right
Yeah,
next door.
it's a neighbor to you. And she came back just raving about the Croatian people, same as you've been. The Croatian people, super friendly. The landscape, the water, just super transparent, beautiful. And that doesn't even get into the mainland with the national parks and the waterfalls and the cities like Dubrovnik. I mean, it's a little country that has a ton to offer. You mentioned like hundreds or what thousands of islands. Like, I mean, it's just insanely beautiful.
Yeah, it really is. And I'm surprised that it's so expensive to get here. I guess you could drive to another city and then fly. Maybe it'd be cheaper, or I don't know if that you could do like a long extended trip to get here, but it well worth it once you get here, I have to say. But set those alerts,
Yeah.
right? So hopefully the prices dip and we can meet up over here. I'd be more than happy to show you
I look
around.
forward to it. I really hope that that will be the case here very soon, and I'm gonna try to prioritize it. So we'll make that happen. Jess, this has been awesome. I've I'm so excited for you and the journey that you've created for yourself and the life there in Croatia. I hope that the visa is renewable and you can stay as long as you want. If you need to get away and come to Spain, you know where to find me. You guys are more than welcome. But thank you so much for coming on the show, sharing all your knowledge. I think a lot of practical info and some super inspirational information as well is perfect for this show. And I think the listeners will get a lot from it.
That's awesome. I'm so glad to hear it, Chase. Really a pleasure to speak with you, and sending lots of positive thoughts to the energy to the audience here.
Thank you. Yes, certainly from Valencia and from the island of Hvar, we're sending lots of positive vibes. Do you want to mention real quick? I'll add all this to the show notes, but we talked about your travel blog and your consulting business. Where can people go to find you and learn more about you and follow along the journey?
Yeah, thanks. So LinkedIn is probably the best place to connect for business stuff. So I'm Jess Romano on LinkedIn, and then also the travel blog is called Tales Traversed. So just talestraversed.com. It's also, I think, linked in my LinkedIn. I'm also on Instagram. I think my handle now is NYC to everywhere. So you can find me there if you want to connect socially as well. And yeah, if there's any listeners out there that want to connect, I love to have chats like this. It's super fun. So yeah.
Awesome. Reach out and connect with Jess for all these things we've discussed today. We'll link to all of those in the show notes, so it'll be easily clickable to follow along. Jess, thank you again so much. It's been a real pleasure. I enjoyed it a lot.
Thanks so much, Chase. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in today from wherever you are in the world. Once again, I'm Chase, and this has been another episode of About Abroad. You can visit aboutabroad.com to get our latest updates and listen to past episodes, or find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, really anywhere you get your podcasts. On that note, if you enjoyed the show, feel free to subscribe, and if inclined, leave a few stars and a review. It's truly, truly appreciated and will help more wanderers just like you find us. Until the next time, adios from España.